Hi, Aqua Roomers. It's time for chapter reading. So, yesterday, there was a fire in the hearth. And do you remember how brave Laura was? I'm going to show you the picture again. Laura had pulled Mary and baby Carrie away from the burning log that had fallen down into the fireplace. Oh, it was very scary. She was so brave. Ma had been outside knocking the fire and all the sticks down from the chimney with a big long stick. Whew. Well, and then Laura said, I was afraid, and I'm scared now. Mary could talk now. She told Ma how Laura had pulled the chair away from the fire. Laura was so little, and the chair was so big and so heavy with Mary and Carrie in it that Ma was surprised. She said she didn't know how Laura had done it. You were a brave girl, Laura, she said, but Laura had really been terribly scared. And no harm is done, Ma said. The house didn't burn up. Mary's skirts didn't catch fire. So everything is all right. When Pa came home, he found the fire was out. The wind was roaring over the low stone top of the chimney, and the house was cold. But Pa said he would build up the chimney with green sticks and fresh clay and plaster it so well it wouldn't catch fire again. He had brought 4 fat ducks, and he said he could have killed hundreds, but 4 were all they needed. He said to Ma, you save the feathers from the ducks and the geese, and I'll shoot you a feather bed. He could, of course, have got a deer, but the weather was not yet cold enough to freeze the meat and keep it from spoiling before they could eat it. And he had found the place where a flock of wild turkeys roosted. Our Thanksgiving and Christmas turkeys, he said. Great big fat fellows. I'll get them when the time comes. Pa went whistling to mix mud and cut green sticks and build the chimney up again while Ma cleaned the ducks. Then the fire merrily crackled, a fat duck roasted, and the cornbread baked. Everything was snug and cozy again. After supper, Pa said he supposed he'd better start to town early the next morning. Might as well go and get it over with, he said. Yes, Charles, you'd better go, Ma said. We could get along all right. If I didn't, said Pa, there's no need of running to town all the time for every little thing. I've smoked better tobacco than that stuff that Scott raised back in Indiana, but it will do. I'll raise some next summer and pay him back. I wish I hadn't borrowed those nails from Edwards. You did borrow them, Charles, Ma replied. And as for tobacco, you don't like borrowing any more than I do. We need more quinine. I've been sparing with the cornmeal, but it's almost gone, and so is the sugar. You could find a bee tree, but there's no cornmeal tree to be found as far as I know, and we'll raise no corn till next year. A little salt pork would taste good too, after all this wild game. And Charles, I'd like to write to the folks in Wisconsin. If you mail a letter now, they can write this winter, and then we can hear from them next spring. And we talked yesterday about how long it takes that rider on the horse to take the letter, ride to Wisconsin, bring a letter back. You're right, Caroline. You always are, Pa said. Then he turned to Laura and Mary and said it was bedtime. If he was going to start early in the morning, he'd better start sleeping early tonight. He pulled off his boots while Mary and Laura got into their nightgowns. But when they were in bed, he took down his fiddle. Softly he played, and softly he sang. So green grows the laurel, and so does the rue. So woeful my love at parting with you. Ma turned toward him and smiled. Take care of yourself on the trip, Charles, and don't worry about us, she told him. We'll be all right. Ooh, and now Pa goes to town. I always like to look at the pictures at the beginning of a chapter. Oh, he must have started either at night or early in the morning. I see the moon and the stars, and there he is with Pet and Patty driving away. Before dawn, Pa went away. When Laura and Mary woke, he was gone, and everything was empty and lonely. It was not as though Pa had only gone hunting. He was going to town, and he would not be back for 4 long days. Do you remember we talked about it takes 2 days to get there because the horses go 20 miles a day. 20, 40 miles to Independence, 2 days to get back. Bunny, oh, that's right, the colt. Oh, Bunny had been shut in the stable so she couldn't follow her mother. The trip was too long for a colt. Bunny whinnied and was lonesome. Laura and Mary stayed in the house with Ma. Outdoors was too large and empty to play when Pa was away. Jack was uneasy too and watchful. At noon, Laura went with Ma to water Bunny and to move the cow's picket pin to fresh grass. The cow was quite gentle now. She followed where Ma led, and she would even let Ma milk her. At milking time, Ma was putting on her bonnet when suddenly Jack's hair stood up stiff on his neck and back, and he rushed out of the house. They heard a yell and a scramble and a shout. Call off your dog! Call off your dog! Mr. Edwards was on top of the woodpile, and Jack was climbing up after him. He's got me treed, Mr. Edwards said, backing along the top of the woodpile. Ma could hardly make Jack come away. Jack grinned savagely and his eyes were red. He had to let Mr. Edwards come down from the woodpile, but he watched him every minute. Ma said, I declare, he seems to know that Mr. Engels isn't here. Mr. Edwards said the dogs knew more than most folks give them credit for. I think that's true. On his way to town that morning, Pa had stopped at Mr. Edwards' house and asked him to come over every day to see that everything was all right. And Mr. Edwards was such a good neighbor that he had come at chore time to do the chores for Ma. But Jack had made up his mind not to let anyone but Ma go near the cow or Bunny while Pa was gone. He had to be shut in the house while Mr. Edwards did the chores. When Mr. Edwards went away, he said to Ma, Keep that dog in the house tonight, and you'll be safe enough. The dark crept slowly all around the house. The wind cried mournfully, and owls said, hoo, hoo. wolf howled, and Jack growled low in his throat. Mary and Laura sat close to Ma in the firelight. They knew they were safe in the house because Jack was there, and Ma had pulled the latch string in. The next day was empty, like the first. Jack paced around the stable and around the house, then around the stable and back to the house. He would not pay any attention to Laura. That afternoon, Mrs. Scott came to visit with Ma. While they visited, Laura and Mary sat politely, as still as mice. Mrs. Scott admired the new rocking chair. The more she rocked in it, the more she enjoyed it, and she said how neat and comfortable and pretty the house was. She said she hoped to goodness they would have no trouble with Indians. Mr. Scott had heard rumors. She said, "Land knows they'll never do anything with this country themselves. All they do is roam around all over it. Treaties or no treaties, the land belongs to folks that come to farm it. That's only common sense and justice." She did not know why the government made treaties with the Indians. This is a terrible thing. But I'm going to read you the words because people didn't understand back then. Well, even today, people don't understand someone who's quite different. They look at the outside and not at the inside. Well, like Gloria. Gloria is so different on the outside, but on the inside, she's just like us. So, Mrs. Scott said, the only good Indian was a dead Indian. That's a terrible thing to say, and she just doesn't know. The very thought of Indians made her worried. She said, "I can't forget, back in Minnesota, my pa and my brothers went out with the rest of the settlers and stopped only 15 miles west of us. I've heard Pa often tell enough." Ma made a sharp sound in her throat, and Mrs. Scott stopped. Whatever it was something that grown-ups would not talk about when little girls were listening. After Mrs. Scott had gone, Laura asked Ma what that was all about. And Ma said she could not explain that now. It was something Laura would understand when she was older. So she's really talking about fights or battles, disagreements with the Indians and the settlers. You see, the Indians always believed that the land was free for everybody, but the settlers didn't feel that way. And it's a shame, really, if people just understood each other. So, anyway, we're going to keep reading. Mr. Edwards came to do the chores again that evening. And again, Jack treed him on the woodpile. Ma had to drag him off. She told Mr. Edwards she couldn't think what had got into that dog. Maybe it was the wind that upset him. So, oh my goodness. So there's Mr. Edwards on top of the woodpile, and Jack is just barking and growling, and my goodness. I don't know why, because Mr. Edwards is a great neighbor. He sure did help Pa build the house and build the stable. The wind had a strange wild howl in it, and it went through Laura's clothes as if the clothes weren't there. her teeth and Mary's teeth chattered while they carried many armfuls of wood into the house. And we'll read more about this tomorrow. Bye, boys and girls.